Serial killers. They've been around for years. You know several of them by name. But what happens when you run up against one of the most evil serial killers of all time? That even in his old age, he enjoyed it so much that if you got him in the right situations, that he may be able to recall each and every murder that he's done, even if the number is vast. Join me as I examine the case of the most prolific serial killer, Samuel Little, on this episode of True Crime and Authors.
Welcome to True Crime and Authors Podcast, where we bring two passions together. The show that gives new meaning to the old adage, truth is stranger than fiction. Here's your host, David McClam.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of True Crime and Authors. Of course, I'm your man, David McClam. Hey, if you guys haven't already, make sure you follow us on all of our social medias. One link to a link tree will get you every link you need to have pertaining to the show. All right, a couple of things to go over before we get into today's case. As you see, I'm a little behind this week due to the closing of the season, which we'll talk about here in a minute, as well as the 4th of July. So sorry about the lateness. Still trying to get you one every week out. I think I am still accomplishing that. As you saw, you got a surprise drop. You did get extraordinary person Susan Snow. Wanted to go ahead and drop that a little early for you because it is a fabulous case. And I always try to cater to my guests. And I know that Susan is going on a book tour here pretty soon. I'm hoping to meet her myself here just in a couple of weeks. So I want to get that released for her. So she has that and is already out there. So I hope you guys enjoyed Susan Snow. If you have not listened to it, go back and listen to it now. It's the one right below this. All right. So as I keep saying, the end of season 1 is coming. This is the beginning of that. I will tell you a little bit more how that's going to go at the end of the show so that you know what's going to happen and what's going to take place over the next month or so. But today's case I'm going to bring you, I think I've told you guys before that some cases I can't redo. I have done this case before on another show. And at the end, I will come back and I will fill you in on what's currently happening with the case or if my stance have changed on this at all. So this case I did on A Day with Crime back on November 12th, 2020. It was our 94th episode at that time. And it is on the case of the most prolific serial killer, Samuel Little. There's been a lot of discussion about who the most prolific is. This guy gets the crown. I've asked this question before, and I've gotten the typical Ted Bundy's, Jeffrey Dahmer's. But when you listen to this case, you're going to be able to tell that this guy truly is that person. And they are still to this day piecing together some of the murders that you're going to hear him confess to here. So without further ado, I'm going to let you hear this case. Again, it was shot over on A Day with Crime. So if it sounds a little bit differently than here, that's because it was mixed over there a little bit differently, even though I changed some things up. I will be back at the end. We'll go over the case, what's new now, and then I'll tell you what's going to happen at the close of the season. All right, guys, talk to you soon. Enjoy the show. Samuel Little was born June 7, 1940. If you're doing the math, that makes him 80 years old. He is an American serial killer and serial rapist. He was convicted in 2012 of the murders of 3 women in California between 1987 and 1989, and in 2018 of the murder of 1 woman in Texas in 1994. He claims to have killed as many as 93 women, and investigators have linked him to over 60 murders. The Federal Bureau of Investigation has confirmed his involvement in at least 50 murders, which makes Little the most prolific convicted serial killer in United States history in terms of proven cases. He allegedly murdered women across 19 states over a quarter of a century, ending around 2005. Okay, so want to stop there because Samuel Little is going to be a little bit of a different dude and a little bit of a different serial killer because Samuel Little does not fit what we've been taught a serial killer is. Now, we've been told that serial killers are usually young men that are white, somewhere around the ages of 30, 35 years of age, sometimes younger, but there's never really been black serial killers. Now, the first black serial killer that we ever heard of was the guy who committed, or they said he committed, the Atlanta child murders, even though he says to this day he didn't do those, but he was registered as the first one. The second black serial killer that we may have known was the DC Sniper, but that was the only two that we knew. Samuel Little is black. That makes him different in himself. But let's learn a little bit about Samuel Little, and I think this will kind of get you in the mind frame of why he ended up going the way that he went. All right, so Samuel Little, he was born in Reynolds, Georgia. Again, as I said, in 1940, June 7th, to his mother, and he claimed that his mother was a prostitute. Soon after his birth, Little's family moved to Lorain, Ohio, where he was brought up mainly by his grandmother. He attended Hawthorne Junior High School, where he had problems with discipline and achievement. In 1956, after being convicted of breaking and entering into property in Omaha, Nebraska, Little was held in an institution for juvenile offenders. Little moved to Florida to live with his mother in his late 20s, working at various times as a cemetery worker and an ambulance attendant by his own account. Little has said he then began traveling more widely and had more run-ins with the law, being arrested in 8 states for crimes that included driving under the influence, fraud, shoplifting, solicitation, armed robbery, aggravated assault, and rape. Little claims that he took up boxing during his stints in prison, referring to himself as a former prize fighter. So as we can see, Samuel started at a very early age. His life of crime just took off from there. So the crimes that brought us here starts in 1961. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison for breaking into a furniture store in Lorain. He was released in 1964, and by 1975, he had been arrested 26 times in 11 states for crimes including theft, assault, attempted rape, fraud, and attacks on government officials. In 1982, Little was arrested in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and charged with the murder of 22-year-old Melinda Rose LaPree, who had gone missing in September of that year. A grand jury declined to indict Little for the murder of LaPree. However, while under investigation, Little was transferred to Florida to be brought to trial for the murder of 26-year-old Patricia Ann Mount, whose body was found in September of 1982. Prosecution witnesses identified Little in court as a person who spent time with Mount on the night before her disappearance. Due to mistrust of witness testimonies, Little was acquitted in January of 1984. Then he moved to California, where he stayed in the vicinity of San Diego. In October of 84, he was arrested for kidnapping, beating, and strangling 22-year-old Lori Barrows, who survived. 1 month later, he was found by police in the backseat of his car with an unconscious woman, also beaten and strangled in the same location as the attempted murder of Barrows. Little served 2.5 years in prison for both crimes, and upon his release in February of 87, he immediately moved to Los Angeles and committed more than 10 additional murders. Little was arrested on September 5th of 2012 at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky, and extradited to California to face a narcotics charge, after which authorities used DNA testing to establish that he was involved in the murder of Carol Eileen Elford, who was killed on July 13th of 1987, Guadalupe Duarte Apodaca, who was killed on September 3rd of 1987, and Audrey Nelson Everett, who also was killed on August 14th of 1989. All 3 women were killed and later found on the streets of Los Angeles. He was extradited to Los Angeles, where he was charged on January 7th of 2013. And a few months later, the police said that Little was being investigated for involvement in dozens of murders committed in the 1980s, which until then had been undisclosed. In connection with the new circumstances of Mississippi, the LaPree murder case was reopened, and in total, Little was tested for involvement in 93 murders of women committed in many U.S. states. Now, let's talk about the nitty gritty. There's a documentary called The 93 Murders of Samuel Little. It is on Hulu and on Amazon Prime. And I watched this whole documentary. And let me just kind of give you the shocking thing. So most of these women were, as you guys probably figured out, they were prostitutes. So they were picked up off the street, never brought back to where it's supposed to be. And then all of a sudden, of course, especially back in the 80s. I mean, you just seen this on TV, and I know because I've done some research in this. I don't know if it's this way now, but back in the 80s and 70s, things like that, prostitutes looked out for one another, right? So they kind of formed a sisterhood. So if somebody was picked up the night before and they didn't come back and you didn't see them the next day, questions starts getting asked. You know I seen her with this dude last time. How come she didn't return? A lot of these women were prostitutes where he felt like he could pick up and kill and dispose of and nobody would ever know or would be looking for them. I think the shocking thing about this is, as I said, Samuel Little is now 80 years of age, but the memory that this guy has and the vigor of way he talks about his crimes is like he was just living them and just committed them yesterday. To show you what I mean, I'm going to play you a little clip, and this is going to be him describing one of the ladies and I'll go in depth a little bit later of how they drew this out of him. But he's been asked if he remembers a certain woman and what she was and could he describe her. So just take a look. Listen.
North Little Rock. Tell me what that girl looked like.
Oh man, I loved her. I forget her name. Oh wait, I think it was Ruth.
Okay.
She was a heavy set, big old yellow gal, and had buck teeth. It had a gap between the teeth. That's what it was. And she was like honey colored skin, and she had like her hair was not really long.
How tall do you think she was?
She was about 5'7".
How much do you think she weighed?
She weighed about close to 200, about 170.
Pretty big girl.
Yeah.
Right. Now, where did you meet her at?
Okay, down in the crack house. They heard about 6 other girls were sitting on the porch. The dude selling crack in there. I stopped to go in there. I seen the girl. That's why I stopped. We stayed together 2 days or more. I think about 3 days. We was going shoplifting. We went to Sears. We went to Kroger's, and that's where I got busted. Mm-hmm. They took me to jail, and she went and stayed in the car. And the manager of Kroger's, I guess he got tired of her laying his property in that car. He called the station where I was at in North Arkansas to drop the charges. Mm-hmm. So he can come down and get this gal and car out of here. They cut me loose. So we was headed toward with that place where Walmart's original store bent. I whooped off the road and back into that little woods. There was a cornfield back there. I pulled through it, and on the other side of the cornfield was a trash pile. I parked the car facing out where I could see anybody coming in. So I pulled her out of the car. She's too big for me to carry her. So I just pulled her out of the car and laid on that trash that was lit there.
So was it like a cornstalk pile, or was it?
Yeah, a bunch of corn stalks.
What could you see from there?
I could see the highway,
mm-hmm.
and in the woods is that way. But it's right outside of Little Rock. I was about 10 miles from it.
From North Little Rock, you think 10 miles?
Yeah, it was about 10 miles.
Okay.
All right, so that was him describing a murder that took place between 1992 and 1994 in Little Rock, Arkansas. I will post this video. So thanks to Crime Vault, where we got this video from, so you can see. If you can see him, if you can hear in his voice, he was cheesing, he was smiling, he was laughing. It was like he was recalling a Dr. Seuss story tale. just cheesing. But at 80, this was shot in 2019. So about 79 at that point, he's able to recall this, who she was, where they met, how he killed her, where he left her, as if it was yesterday. Well, that goes perfectly with what I'm going to segue into, because we're going to talk about his trial incarceration. I'm going to read you guys some of the things he confessed to, but it's important before I do that for you to know this part that is not in Wikipedia or anyplace else. You have to research this to find this part out. So how exactly did they get him to sit down and tell him all these things? So the FBI kind of did their research on Samuel Little. They come to find out that Samuel Little knew how to draw. He was an artist and he loved to draw. So they had kind of came with this thing of maybe if we tell him that we're going to let him have a little art class, right? He'll, confess to some things. Let me just show you what a great memory he had. So they gave him this pad. I mean, they spared no expense, dude. That wasn't no cheap stuff. They gave him anything he wanted: pad, coloring pencils, drawing chalks, whatever. And they asked him, do you remember what any of these victims looked like? Could you draw them? Samuel Little began to draw every victim that he had ever killed. Every one of them. There were so many of them that the investigator actually plastered his wall with all of the drawings. The crazy thing was this. They had said, even if he draws the faces, it's been so many years, there's no way that he's going to remember them. And each drawing that he did was exact to the woman that he killed, because they ran some of them against some of the family members and said, is this your family member? And they would say, oh yeah, that's so-and-so. That's so-and-so. Candid. They also came back and said that at one time, because being that he was a killer, they had his hands shackled. And then I think at one point they actually did release the chains a little bit where he can move his hands freely. But one of the investigators, I think, said that they think he got so excited at one point that they didn't realize it until later on, but he was pleasuring himself right there while he's talking about all these murders. So he took joy in what he did. And watching that documentary, you can tell, because it wasn't like, yeah, I think she was this big yellow girl. It was like, no, man, look, she was this yellow girl, dog. You heard him? He was smiling and cheesing and recounting and remembering, and then it comes to where he's killing them. Very deadly man. So I wanted to point that out. So if anybody says, well, there's not a serial killer that remembers everything, this guy remembered everything going way back from the 70s up till now. It's almost like he just went and did this stuff yesterday. It was very chilling and scary, because I would never have a memory like that. So Little was tried for the murders of Elford, Nelson, and Apodaca in September of 2014. Prosecution presented the DNA evidence as well as testimony of witnesses who were attacked by the accused at different times throughout his criminal career. On September 25th of 2014, Little was found guilty, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. On the next day of the verdict, Little continued to insist on his innocence. So as of 2020, Little was serving a sentence at the California State Prison in Los Angeles County. Now, that was the other thing, too, is I guess at some point he just figured, I'm in here for life. But even though he's in there for life, they still had to goat these other cases out of him. And the one thing that the FBI agent did was he made friends with Samuel Little. If you watch the 93 Victims of Samuel Little, you will see that. Dude was like his friend. I mean, he didn't just bring him in and say, all right, Samuel, look, we know you killed him. Do this. No, he was talking. I mean, they didn't even get to the murders, I think, for like 1 or 2 days, right? It was just basically finessing him. Do you need a Coke? Can we get you some burgers? It was almost like if he went to the park to hang out with his friend. And that was his whole strategy. And then after Samuel Little trusted him and they became friends, he went to, all right, Sam, now we've had all this time. I really would like you to help me solve some of these. And because if you watch that, he was like, oh no, man, every time I try to, I trust somebody, this happened and that happens, and they try to do this. So the investigator, to his credit, had to really work And then finally, he just like, all right, man, he said, look, I'll bring you in these drawing tools for you. And he was like, all right, man, and then pretty soon Samuel started talking and he never shut up. And we got all these cases out of him. So it took some work. So his later confessions was on November 9th of 2018, he confessed to the 1996 fatal strangulation of Melissa Thomas. On November 13, 2018, Little was charged with the 1994 murder of Denise Christie brothers in Odessa, Texas, after having confessed a crime to a Texas Ranger in May of 2018. Little pleaded guilty to the murder of brothers on December 13, and he received another life sentence. The Ector County, Texas District Attorney and Wise County Sheriff's Office also announced on November 13th that Little had confessed to dozens of murders and may have committed more than 90 across 14 states between 1970 and 2005. On November 15th of 2018, the Russell County, Alabama District Attorney announced that Little had earlier that month confessed to the 1979 murder of 23-year-old Brenda Alexander, whose body was found in Phoenix City. On November 16th of 2018, in Macon, Georgia, sheriffs announced that Little had credibly confessed to the 1977 strangling murder of an unidentified woman and the 1982 strangling murder of 18-year-old Fredonia Smith. In the fall of 2018, Little confessed to the 1982 murder of 55-year-old Dorothy Richards and the 1996 murder of 40-year-old Daisy McGuire. Both of their bodies were found in Houma, Louisiana. On November 19th of 2018, Harrison County, Mississippi Sheriff Troy Peterson said that Little had confessed to strangling 36-year-old Julia Critchfield in the Gulfport area in 1978 and dumped her body off a cliff. On November 20th of 2018, Lee County, Mississippi law enforcement officials announced that Little had admitted to killing 46-year-old Nancy Carol Stevens in Tupelo in 2005 and that the case would be presented to a grand jury in January of 2019. On November 21st of 2018, Richland County, South Carolina, authorities announced that Little had confessed to murdering 19-year-old Evelyn Weston, whose body was found near Fort Jackson in 1978. And Little also confessed to having killed 20-year-old Rosie Hill in Marion County, Florida in 1982. On November 27th of 2018, the Federal Bureau of Investigations announced that a violent criminal apprehension program team had confirmed 34 of Little's confessions and was working to match the remainder of Little's confessions to known murders or suspicious deaths. Little began making the confessions in exchange for a transfer out of the Los Angeles County prison in which he was being held. One included his confession to a previous cold case homicide in Prince George's County, Maryland, previously one of only 2 homicide cases in that county with unidentified victims. And in December of 2018, Little was indicted for strangling Linda Sue Boards, 23, to death in May of 1981 in Warren County, Kentucky. Her body was found on May 15, 1981, near U.S. Route 68. One of Little's victims was identified in December 2018 as Martha Cunningham of Knox County, Tennessee, who was 34 years old when Little murdered her in 1975. So before I go with the indictments, all of those cases, just so you guys know, was brought up by that detective. And as Little continued to tell them who he killed and where they were at. Now, understand this. He didn't necessarily remember all their names. So how they was piecing these together is they had all of these missing women files, and he was telling them, here's what they looked like, here's how tall they were, here's what they was wearing last, here was their hair color. He couldn't remember all the names, but because of the description in the photo he was able to draw, they were able to pull all of these cases. And if you watch that documentary, you see these detectives in the room, especially the female, their mouths just drop. They're like, there is no way that we sitting in here. We've never had anybody that can do this. And at first they thought he was full of it. But they was like, no, for one, nobody could have ever killed this many people. Because once he got about 30 people, they was like, okay, we're questioning his credibility here. You know, he goes, most serial killers, they are meant to 5, 10, maybe 15 is a stretch, but he says this guy's at 30 and he's still counting. And when they started running these against the different states, they was finding out that it was true up until the point to where they was able to confirm at least 30 of them. And I think the reason why he ended up in the California jail is because when they asked him, where do you think you killed the most at? I believe the two states he said was Utah and California. So when they started piling the body count, here he was. And he was enjoying it because, I mean, you just watch this dude tell these stories. It was like recalling a vacation. And I think at one point he did say, because I think they did ask him, why were you doing this? And I think he did say that he just enjoyed it. He enjoyed the way that it felt to wrap his hands around a woman's throat. And I think at one point it got really disturbing because if I remember correctly, he started describing a woman's throat, right? You know, what he liked about the woman's throat and feeling it and all that kind of stuff. And I was in here going, this dude here is just, he out there. Okay, so on May 31st, 2019, the Cuyahoga County, Ohio prosecutors announced indictments with 4 counts of aggravated murder and 6 counts of kidnapping that accused Little of killing Mary Jo Payton in 1984 and Rose Evans in 1991 in Cleveland. Both victims were strangled and dumped. The body of Rose Evans, 32, was found on August 24th of 1991 in a vacant lot on East 39th Street. She left her hometown of Birmingham, New York, when she was 17. Evans had been strangled, according to coroner Elizabeth K. Balraj. As for Payton, an anthropologist had to create a model of what she looked like, but she remained unidentified until 1992 when Cleveland put her thumbprint in an FBI database and got a match. Little picked up Payton at a bar near East 105th and Euclid Avenues. He described her as a short, plump woman in her 20s with brown hair. Little also confessed to killing another Cleveland woman in 1977 or 1978. The woman murdered in 1977 or 1978 was found on March 18th of 1983 in Willoughby Hills, according to the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. She was likely black and somewhere between 17 and 35 years old. The woman's body had been dumped down a grassy slope near a forest or near a fence in a wooded area just off Interstate 271, and her body was found by a man walking his dog. Only her skeleton, some clothing, and jewelry remained. Little has also confessed to killing 1 woman in Akron, 2 in Cincinnati. One of the bodies was dumped outside of Columbus, and 1 woman he met in Columbus and disposed of in Kentucky. Of the 2 women Little murdered in Cincinnati, one was identified as Anna Stewart, 33, whose body was dumped in Grove City. Stewart was last seen on October 6, 1981, getting out of a cab at General Hospital to see her sister in the hospital, now known as UC Medical Center. She was killed on October 11th. He killed the other woman between 1980 and 1999. The Jane Doe was anywhere from 15 to 50, as the details of her age and the date of her murder are unclear. She was black, slender, wore glasses, and lived in the over-the-Rhine neighborhood of Cincinnati with a heavy female Hispanic. Little left her beside a cigarette billboard in Ohio. And on June 2019, Little was indicted in Hamilton County, Ohio, for murdering the woman killed in Cincinnati. Little has drawn portraits of many women he killed. These portraits have been released by the FBI in hopes of someone identifying the women. At least one portrait has solved a cold case in Akron, Ohio. So that about concludes the case of Samuel Little. Just to let you guys know, they're still trying to dig through to confirm all of these cases. The cases that they have pretty much confirmed was Anna Stewart, who was October 11, 1981, the day she murdered Mary Jo Payton, who was killed July 3rd of 84. Carol Elford, who was killed July 13, 1987. Guadalupe Apodaca, September 3rd, 1987. Audrey Nelson, August 14 of 1989. Jane Doe, 1980 to 1999. Rose Evans, August 24th, 1991. And Denise Christie Brothers, February 2nd of 1994, which he has been convicted of each and every one of those murders. All the rest, they still say that they're looking to see if they can pin him with those. Well, if you guys listen to this podcast long enough, you know that I am 100% against the death penalty. But if there was ever a case for it, this definitely would be one. Samuel Little is very evil. If you watch the documentary, you'll pick up on that. That's like he enjoyed doing this. It was like I said, reading a child a bedtime story. He's going to be in jail the rest of his life. And I hope that they do find that he did do the rest of these murders just so the family could have some closure, which I believe that he did. I mean, they have to check the validity of it because they're still saying it's probable that he's still lying. But the thing is if you watch him and watch him recall it, there's no way this guy is lying about any of that. And this is something that he did and he enjoyed it and he wanted to do it. And I think this is probably one of the most cases that flabbergasted me of all that we've done. I mean, this is like 94 episodes, the 94th episode, and we've talked about some people that I consider to be the most horrendous people in the world. But when I saw this documentary and saw this guy, I was like, he just takes the cake. So rest in peace to all of the victims. If the families ever hear this, we hope that if you haven't gotten closure already, that you do get closure, that you can, lay your loved one to rest, at least in your heart. I understand the circumstances was not what anybody wanted. And regardless of what some of these women did or were, they did not deserve to die at the hands of Samuel Little in the way in which they did. All right, guys, so that was the case of Samuel Little. Now, I still have my same stance on that case to this day. The guy was pure evil. If you were listening to all of those to this very day, as I'm speaking to you, they're still piecing together all of these crimes that he says that he's committed. They've been doing this now ever since he started confessing. And there are a lot of them that they have confirmed and a lot they have not, even though Samuel Little has provided 26 sketches of other suspected murder victims. They still don't want to go out there yet and say he's done them unless they can prove it. That's just the expected ones, and he has admitted to several others. So I want you guys to just put this in the back of your mind. If it is found out that Samuel Little did commit all of these crimes, which I'm going to tell you, I don't see any reason for them not to believe him, just because of the man's recounting skills alone, how active he was, the known areas where he's saying that he has these victims are looking into these murders that they can't piece together or they're trying to piece together now. I think that he did do that. If they found him guilty of all of these murders, he would have killed, I think at this point, over 93 is what he confessed to, but they're saying well over 120 different victims is possibly under his belt for murder, which would make him the most prolific serial killer in history. Now, they're already saying that he's already that at the 93 mark. But if we keep adding this to the belt, that means he has taken out more people, mainly women, than anybody else. And that is sad. So, what sense has become of Samuel Little? People love him to always say, I feel like I live in the capital of the world where people come here that commits heinous crimes. Because, Samuel Little was housed here in LA County Jail, which I'm probably pretty much assuming is Twin Towers downtown or where they housed him at. So what happened to him? Well, Samuel Little is no longer on this earth. He died December 30th of 2020 in a Los Angeles County area hospital. Now, they didn't give any cause of death, but Samuel Little did suffer from many different ailments, including diabetes and heart problems, and he did have other conditions. There's some things there that I don't think LA County is telling anybody because he died not in jail, but he died in a hospital, which leads me to believe that he was sick previous to his death and they carried him in and they knew something. But of course, when you commit the crimes that he has committed, nobody really cares what you die from or what you're dying of or really want to give you the details. But Samuel Little is no longer here. He is meeting his maker or has met his maker, and he is now having to deal with all of the heinous crimes in which he has committed. All right, guys, so let me tell you what the end of season 1 is looking like, because we are at the end of that. So you got this case today. I'm going to tell you here shortly who we're going to bring to you next week. And after that, season 1 is in the books. So when I come back to you in the 3rd week of this month, we're going to be talking about the ending of season 1. I'll do a little recap for you. I'll let you guys know where we are and what you can look forward to in season 2. If there's some authors or extraordinary people that did not get put on season 1, I greatly apologize. You guys will be there first and foremost in season 2. I had so many authors and extraordinary people that I'm grateful that I had, that it just was not possible to fit everybody in one season. I'll get more into that on the recap as we do go through that in a couple of weeks. All right, so that's what season 1 is looking like. We're coming to the end of that. And then I'm going to tell you what to look forward to in season 2, like I said, and there's some exciting things to look forward to, so you do not want to miss when I come back in a couple of weeks and tell you that. All right, with that being said, next week, we're going to give you author Fred K. He went from civil attorney all the way to an animal law attorney. Got rid of his civil practice, picked up animal law, and he ends up investigating the murder of a very famous horse. You definitely don't want to miss that interview I had with Fred K. Make sure you tune in to that next week. Also, I'm going to give you the fabulous Wendy Eckel. She is the author of Rosalie Hart Mystery Series. We're going to go into a deep dive with her on that series, how it came to be, and just talk to her a little bit personally. You don't want to miss that. And for your extraordinary person, definitely probably the funniest guest of the year, his name is Tyler Foley. Tyler's been acting since the age of 6, and he was in several unforgettable appearances in movies like Freddy vs. Jason and Carrie, just to name 2. He now works with CEOs, and he teaches them how to engage their audience. And out of all of that, he is also a #1 best-selling author. And he is totally hilarious. If you are somebody out there that has tried many professions and never settled into one and want to know how to do that, you definitely don't want to miss my interview with Tyler Foley next week. All right, I thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart for tuning in each and every week. I know you do have many choices in true crime podcasts, and I'm just grateful that I am one of them. Make sure you tune in next week for Fred K., Wendy Eckel, and Tyler Foley. You don't want to miss those. I hope you guys all had a happy and safe 4th of July. Hope you guys are being safe out there. And always remember, always stay humble. An act of kindness can make someone's day. A little love and compassion can go a long way. And this is the podcast where 2 passions becomes 1. I'll catch you guys on the next one.
Thank you for listening to True Crime and Authors. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. Join us on social media. On Facebook at True Crime and Authors. On Twitter at Authors True. On YouTube and TikTok at True Crime and Authors. And email at truecrimeandauthors@gmail.com. Cover art and logo designed by Dazzling_Ray from Fiverr. Sound mixing and editing by David McClam. Intro script by Sophie Wild from Fiverr. And I'm the voice guy, your imaging guy from Fiverr. See you next time on True Crime and Authors.